Hey, y'all. Haven't seen you in a little while. Time for a quick story. Our theme currently is vision, seeing what you really need to see. Here's a story that I found in my archives reminding us that sometimes the very best way to see clearly is to close your eyes. I'll play the story for you right after the introductory music. All the birds in the barnyard were very, very excited. The duck, quack, 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 and the chicken, quack, 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 and the doves, ooh, the peacock, wow, and the guinea. The guinea was hysterical. Putlick, 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 putlick. They were all talking about a wildcat that had been sneaking into the barnyard at night and gobbling up birds. The birds of the barnyard decided that someone was going to have to stay awake all night long and stand guard. And if the wildcat came, they'd have to make a lot of noise so everyone could fly up into the trees to safety. The duck said he could keep watch. He would stay awake all night long, and if the wildcat came, he would quack very loudly so everyone would know to fly away. All the other birds went sound asleep. And that night, the duck stood in the middle of the barnyard, and he kept careful watch. He looked up the road, and he looked down the road. But he didn't see a wildcat coming. The night grew later and later and later, and the duck got very sleepy. And before long, the duck was sound asleep. Whack, 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 whack. Quack, 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 quack. He snored so loudly that he didn't even hear the wildcat come sneaking through the woods. The wildcat climbed right over the gate, and then all of a sudden, quack, 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 the duck was dead. In the morning, everyone was so upset. Ooh, ooh, wow! And that guinea, still hysterical. The duck had been eaten in the middle of the night. The chicken said that she would stand guard. She had all kinds of little baby chicks that she kept her eyes on. She knew how to keep track of many different things all at the same time, and she wasn't going to let that wildcat come in without sounding an alarm. So that night when all the birds went to sleep, the chicken stood in the middle of the barnyard, and she kept careful watch. She looked up the road. She looked down the road. But she didn't see a wildcat coming. It got very, very late, but the chicken didn't want to fall asleep. She remembered what happened to the duck. And so she decided to keep herself awake, she would sing songs. She was so busy singing, she didn't even hear the wildcat come sneaking through the woods. She didn't hear him climb right over the gate. All of a sudden, the chicken was dead. In the morning, all of the birds of the barnyard were so upset. The doves were saying, ooh, ooh. The peacock was shrieking, wow! And the guinea, hysterical. Putlick, 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 putlick. The chicken, just like the duck, had been eaten right up. The doves said that they would watch for the wildcat. There were 2 doves, and 2 birds watching was better than 1. They wouldn't let that wildcat in without sounding the alarm. So the other birds in the barnyard slept soundly, while the doves perched on a fence and watched. One dove looked down the road, and another dove looked up the road. And they watched, and they watched, and they watched, and the night grew later and later and later. It gets very boring looking in the same direction all night long. And so the doves decided they would turn around and look in the opposite direction. And when the doves turned round, they caught sight of each other. They couldn't take their eyes off one another. They just sat there saying, ooh, ooh. They had fallen madly in love. They were so busy talking together, they didn't hear the wildcat come sneaking through the woods. He climbed right over the gate and all of a sudden, woo! The doves were dead. The next morning, the peacock was shrieking, wow! And the guinea was still hysterical, putluck, 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 putluck. What were they going to do? The peacock volunteered to keep watch. He was the biggest bird in the barnyard after all. So that night, while the guinea slept, the peacock stood in the middle of the barnyard, and he looked up the road, and he looked down the road, and then he thought, maybe that wildcat is sneaking in from behind. So he turned around to look behind himself, and when he did, he caught sight of his fancy tail. He was so taken with that fancy tail, he couldn't do anything but stand there looking at it and saying, wow! Wow! He was so busy bragging about his tail, wow! He didn't even hear the wildcat come sneaking through the woods. It climbed right over the gate, and all of a sudden, wow! The peacock was dead. The next morning, the guinea was standing there all by itself, putluck, 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 hysterical. That night, the guinea fowl stayed awake. But as the night drug on, and the guinea waited for the wildcat, she started to get very, very sleepy. But she couldn't go to sleep. She remembered what had happened to the duck and the chicken and the doves and the peacock. The guinea thought she could tell jokes to keep herself awake. She loved jokes so much, even though there was no one else there to hear, she would laugh at her own jokes. This is the joke that she told. What did one nose hole say to the other nose hole?
Turn the lights on, and we might see a booger man.
She was so busy laughing at her own joke, she didn't hear the wildcat come sneaking through the woods. He climbed right over the gate, and all of a sudden, the guinea was dead. Well, the next morning, there were no birds left in the barnyard, except for a turkey. The turkey always stood off by himself. But now the turkey stood in the middle of the barnyard. And that night the turkey did not snore, and he did not sing songs. He didn't talk to anyone. There was no one else to talk to. He did not look at his fancy tail, and he did not tell jokes. The turkey didn't make any noise at all. In fact, he closed his eyes and he listened. When he was very quiet, he heard something crunching on the leaves in the woods. He heard something rattling the gate. And then the turkey sounded the alarm. And the farmer came running out with his big gun and bang! Shot the wildcat dead. And that was the end of that.